Hi class, in chapter 11 part 2 we are going to talk about cosmetics including skin, hair, and oral care products. What I would like you to understand in this segment is what types of products there are and how they're formulated to do the jobs that they do. So let's learn something about that. Cosmetics are defined as anything intended to be applied directly to the human body for cleansing, beautifying, promoting attractiveness, or altering your appearance. Um, Main components that we find in cosmetics may be surfactants, which we learned about in the part 1, surface active agents that help mix, emulsify, suspend the formulations together, particularly water and oil or pigments and water. Fragrance is common in cosmetics, and their main task is to either clean, whiten, color, odor, or deodorize. So they have a main reason you use them, like a shampoo, for example. And then there's a secondary function that they would have to maybe, in the case of a shampoo, add body or volume to your hair. And then there are more subtle qualities that in a cosmetic that maybe just make you feel better, add confidence that they give us. The skin is the body's largest organ, and so this is big business. You don't have to know the biology part of it, but the outer layer is called the epidermis, and that's what we are treating when we use lotions and cosmetics. But it's a huge business. I don't know how much, but it'd be many billions of pounds of skin cleaning, functioning soaps, moisturizers, emollients, deodorants. If you include all of them, big business. This is a cross section of the skin, and what we're talking about when we apply a lotion or use a shampoo is just affecting that top layer. In contrast to, for example, next chapter we're going to talk about drugs, which go inside and have systemic effects. So you have these glands, like you saw briefly, quickly in the previous slide, that normally submit or secrete oils to keep your skin moist, but we wash a lot. Particularly now, we're washing our hands a lot, and they're drying out. Your skin can dry out, your hair can dry out, and so we use products to try and then put that what we took out back in. So, like lotions and creams, we use to moisturize the skin, and they can be either oil and water or water and oil. We'll see that in a second. Antiperspirants and deodorants do a little bit different things. Antiperspirant is supposed to keep you from sweating. You don't have to memorize this, but there's aluminum ions that keep your sweat glands from sweating so much, and deodorants that combat odor. And I just pulled an example of a couple of products that I've never seen this Old Spice Swagger. I don't know why they would want to call a deodorant Swagger and why you'd want to smell like that, but oh well, I'm not a guy. Um, the main types of skin moisturizers that there are either water and oil emulsions or oil and water emulsions. And I know when I go to the store to buy a lotion or a cream, I look at the ingredients, but then I'm a chemist, but because they do tell me something. And for example, this Pond's cold cream on the left was something my mother used to use a lot, and it's primarily or partly to remove makeup. It's very oily. It is a water and oil emulsion. That means that oil is a larger amount in there than the water. And so if you look at the ingredient list there under a typical cold cream, the first ingredient is mineral oil. And so if I look at a cream and the first ingredient is an oil, I know it's going to be much more oily than if the first ingredient is water, because that continuous phase, what would be called the continuous phase, is an oil, and it's water droplets in oil. Whereas the Vaseline on the right, The first ingredient is water, and it says water, glycerin, which we've seen the structure of before. Petrolatum is Vaseline. So this is kind of a heavy, that's on our list of hydrocarbons, higher molecular weight, not very volatile. This is kind of a heavy moisturizing cream. And then there's other things in there that are going to emulsify the oil droplets in water. But with water, the first ingredient, that's the continuous phase, and you would be applying then water with some oil in it versus the other way around. Some cosmetics are simply colorants. I think this one's kind of interesting, so I chose to look at this slide, and that is the active ingredient in henna. You don't really have to know that, but it's no surprise that many cosmetics are used strictly for adding color. A fragrance I think is really interesting. I some years ago, back in the 90s, went and toured a fragrance, a perfumery in France, on the south of France, in Grasse, I believe it was, called Molinard. And they talked about this and how they formulate a fragrance. And fragrances have multiple parts. And so I would like you to remember this. I think it's interesting. And when you go to buy one, you can tell the difference in what they're doing here a little bit. There's a top notes, what's in a fragrance, and that's the more volatile compounds in there, and that's like the first thing that would hit your nose. And then there's heart notes that make up the base, sort of, well, like a lot of what it is, the most noticeable, recognizable part. So like if it's a floral scent, then the heart note is going to have a floral component to it. And then a base note is the heavier, muskier, longer lasting part of a fragrance. And they have this musical metaphor when they use the term top notes, heart notes, base notes. And the difference in these molecules is related to the volatility. So you see this top note, this 2-phenyl ethanol, is not a very large molecule, and so it would volatilize pretty readily, and has, I think, a floral, yeah, they say hyacinths and lilacs, which that sounds nice. The molecule down, the next one that's a heart note, I love the smell of roses, is 2-phenyl ethanol. Now those molecules don't look very different. They're actually not very different in molecular weight. But the second one there, the ethanol can have hydrogen bonding, and so that's going to lower the boiling point by quite a bit. It's going to make it a much less volatile compound than the first one, even though it's not really heavier by very much. But the third one is a heavier compound. That is civitone, I guess is how you say it, and that is going to give it a musk-like odor. That's a sort of a base note in a fragrance. So I think that those are interesting, and the formulation of fragrances is an interesting chemistry area. Let's move on to sunscreens. We haven't talked about those yet. Sunscreens are lotions that contain molecules that either reflect or scatter or absorb harmful UV rays. If it contains, the sunscreen contains zinc or titanium dioxide, that's used to scatter UV. They have a white color to them, unless they've started using some nanotechnology. And some of this stuff worries me a bit. It's pretty new, and I wonder if we really know what happens when we nanosize some of these pigment particles. But if they make the particles small enough, then the wavelength of light would be absorbed still, because that occurs at a molecular level, but it wouldn't be reflected or refracted like it would be if in larger pigment molecules. So they can make it clear, the sunscreen, or clearer. Or they add compounds like these that absorb the UV rays before they get to your skin, and so then the UV isn't damaging your skin. It's just being absorbed harmlessly by these organic compounds that are efficient UV absorbers. Sunless tanning lotion is a very different thing, and that is causing a chemical reaction to go on your skin and bronze it, make a bronzier color. There are molecules such as the one shown here, dihydroxyacetone, and it would react with amino acids in the skin and produce a tan. So your turn. Skin is the main target of cosmetics. True or false? That would be true. And skin is the largest, the main target, and it's the largest organ in your body, and it's big business. If a moisturizing lotion lists its contents as water, glycerin, olive oil, stearic acid, what type of lotion would it be? Now think about it. If the first ingredient is water and then oil, then it must be an oil in water emulsion. That would be A. Dental care, oral care are steps taken to promote healthy teeth, gums, tongue, the whole mouth in general, whereas dental care is concerning the teeth. Your tooth enamel is a mineral, calcium hydroxyapatite, that is susceptible to acid attack. And my understanding, I don't have a deep knowledge of this chemistry, but when food sits on your teeth and decays, it does produce an acid, and that attacks the enamel of your teeth. And so the reason we add fluoride is to harden that enamel so that it's less susceptible to acid attack. And so you see in typical toothpaste fluorides, stannous fluoride, that's a tin fluoride, which doesn't sound like something you'd want to put in your mouth, but I guess it's okay. It's been around for a while, and that is used to prevent cavities. It would be there in really small amounts, and you spit it out. You don't eat toothpaste anyway. Hydrated silica is a mild abrasive, so it helps scrub things off of your teeth. There would be surfactants to help, clean and remove particulates. Flavoring agents help make it taste better, and pigments. There's that TiO2 again. It was in the soap, it's in your wall paint, and in your sunscreen, and it's just it's cheap, and it's good UV and visible light reflector, so that would make the toothpaste white, and then it may have colorants in it to make it blue. If it's whitening, it would contain peroxides. Like this is the toothpaste I use. I bought this a couple days ago and thought, oh, I'm getting ready to record that video. I guess I'll take a picture of my toothpaste. Some whitening toothpaste may just have an abrasive, but most of them, if they really say they're whitening, then they're containing peroxides. You can see they listed under inactive ingredients. The active ingredient is sodium fluoride. You can see up on their upper left. But down under the inactive ingredients, there's sodium bicarbonate. That would be a base to neutralize acid. And that's one of the reasons I like this toothpaste, is I like the taste of baking soda. That's sodium bicarbonate baking soda. My son does not like the taste of this toothpaste. He doesn't like how he said it foams in his mouth. And it's got sodium carbonate peroxide, which is a whitening agent. A peroxide, that would be like what is in your Clorox 2 laundry detergent. It'd be in here in small amounts, and you spit it out. You don't swallow it. So it's not that big of a deal, but that is a whitening agent as a peroxide like that. And then there you can see the silica is an abrasive. Saccharin would be giving it flavor without being sugar. Water, and then some the sodium sulfate, the detergent, like soapy type stuff again too. So now you know what to look for in toothpaste a little bit when you look at the label, depending on what you want it to do. Hair care, shampoo is a formulation used to clean the hair. We all know that. Typically has anionic surfactants and pH value formulated to be slightly acidic. A conditioner moisturizes and helps replace the natural oils that we remove when we shampoo, and gives us, the look, feel to your hair that you want, especially making it easier to comb out. And then you can get oil and color treatments. Color treatments really do some chemistry on the hair, depending on what they are, whether they're semi-permanent or permanent, or bleaching. But we don't plan on covering that. This is a typical shampoo. If it has ammonium lauryl sulfate, you can see that's a sulfate anion there. Those are typical. They work well in hard water, like we talked about in the part 1. And slightly acidic is good. I think this is why my soap, one time I made it a few years ago, was awful on my hair. I think it was probably slightly basic, left, from the sodium hydroxide. I tried to use it as shampoo. That did not work at all. You need the pH to be on the lower side, more acidic, because apparently the cuticles lie down and much better than if it's a higher pH, then you get ruffled outside to the hair, and that's not good. Well, unless you want your hair looking dull and flat. The hair itself is a lifeless structure of protein. We talked about this. We talked about proteins, about keratin, and that they were a long chain of amino acid groups. We looked before at the structure of amino acids, and the thing that we're going to go into related to the chemistry of hair now is permanence. And what do you do when you straighten or curl your hair? Well, what you do, it's a chemical process that breaks and then reforms crosslinks in the hair. There are disulfide crosslinks in the hair. We'll see the structures in a second, that help give the hair strength. And depending on what kind of hair you have, whether it's curly or straight, they're oriented in a certain way along the strands. You have so many of them, they're holding it curly or making it straight. There are salt links and there are hydrogen bonds. So let's look at the difference in these. The disulfide link is on the left, and it's a strong link. It's a covalent bond between two pieces of strands. So in two protein strands, it's connecting those two. And a cross-link then means that they can't slide past each other. We'll talk about cross-links when we talk about plastics. A plastic that is not cross-linked, well, is a plastic. It'll melt and reform. Whereas if you cross-link a plastic, then it's a thermoset, and it doesn't melt. So that's what you would have like on the tires on your car, because it can't melt when it's going down the road. And so your hair is pretty tough. It's got these cross links in it. It's protein in the first place, and then it has these cross links, and it's not going to just melt your head. There are salt links. That would be an ionic bond there in the middle, and then on the right, that is a hydrogen bond. That would be the weakest of the bonds, but they still have some strength to them, as we've talked about, connected with water. And this is showing the cross-link forming between the two chains. But what I would like you to know is that the chemistry of perms is the breaking and reforming of those disulfide links. So you see on the left, if those two strands of hair, for example, the protein strands are treated with this chemical thioglycolic acid, it would cleave those cross links, and then your hair is rolled or straightened depending on what it is you want to do to it, and then it's chemically treated again to reform them in the final shape that you're trying to go for. Your turn. Hair gets most of its strength from what? The protein molecules, hydrogen bonds, disulfide links, salt links. It would be the protein molecules themselves. Surfactants are molecules that need a polar and a nonpolar part. If the polar part is a carboxylic acid group, then the nonpolar part would be what? Alcohol, ester, hydrocarbon, or cysteine. It's the hydrocarbon. Remember from the triglycerides, the polar part is the carboxylic acid, sodium salt, the carboxylic acid, and then there's this long chain of hydrocarbon, carbons and hydrogens. There are, in conclusion to this part, a lot of things that go into our personal care products, and it just depends on what we want them to do as the additives that are in there. And I hope that when you look at some of these products in the future, you'll have a better idea of what it is you're looking at when you look at your toothpaste or your hand lotion or a fragrance when you smell it, or whatever the product is, your sunscreen. And if you have any questions about this, don't hesitate to send me an email. The book has more information than what I give you in the lectures. It's just like a lot of information, but it would have more behind some of these things than what I've presented here. So let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in chapter